Good morning, guys. Today we are talking about the Holocaust and some of a little bit of a continuation of what we were working on yesterday. And so I know yesterday we kind of focused on um, the people who perpetrated the Holocaust, people who might have rescued others, those who claimed it was that they were following orders. Today, we're going to kind of focus on the vast majority of people who lived in Germany who actually participated or didn't participate and have been looked at and given the term of bystanders in the study of in social studies and in history. Something called the bystander effect, it was termed in the early 50s, early 60s, like in that decade, when and in particular when people studied the murder of a young girl in New York City. And today you're going to read an article and mark the text and answer questions about that article and about what you're going to watch with me today. And those questions are all in a Google form. But I wanted to talk to you about this woman. Her name is Kitty Genovese. She probably one of the most famous murders in New York City, or one of the more well-known. And in fact, the story of how she was killed and the people who stood by and witnessed it and did nothing to stop it has been kind of a subject and so of concern and controversy. The video I'm going to show you right now will give you a little bit of background on the story, but also give you some of the things that have been over the years reported incorrectly. So let's start with this video. I'll pull it up right here, and I'm going to make it fit the whole screen, and we'll watch.
We continue now with our look into the murder of Kitty Genovese. As has already been mentioned, a week after the murder, the New York Times reported that, quote, for more than half an hour, 38 respectable, law-abiding citizens in Queens watched a killer stalk and stab a woman in 3 separate attacks, unquote. The New York Times itself has now called that report erroneous, but more than 50 years later, the rape and murder continues to be discussed and studied precisely because most of us continue to believe that dozens of people failed to come to her aid. Fordham University professor Harold Takushian is an authority on the Kitty Genovese case and has conducted several experiments to further explore what has come to be known as the bystander effect or the Kitty Genovese syndrome. Professor Takushian joins me now. Professor, welcome.
Thank you.
So, Professor, first of all, what is fact and what is fiction about what happened to Kitty Genovese 52 years ago?
We had a conference in Fordham University in 2014 on the 50th anniversary, and this was a thorny issue. I wouldn't say that the initial reporting was erroneous. I would say it was exaggerated. It was erroneous in the sense that it wasn't exact. It was 2 attacks rather than 3. There may not have been 38 witnesses, but that's not erroneous because this poor woman screamed for her life, and people saw it and they didn't intervene, and that's the reality of the situation. So what Abe Rosenthal wrote was wrong in the details, but correct in the substance.
So talk about what is called the bystander effect or the Kitty Genovese syndrome. What is it?
Briefly, Rosenthal, the journalist, was the one that challenged us behavioral scientists, and he said, why didn't people help her? And we realized that we don't know why people do help each other. In fact, the 1964 incident has created a new area of psychology called prosocial behavior that simply didn't exist before that. We did not know why people help each other. And now, fortunately, we do. We do understand it much better.
And your experiments that you've conducted, what exactly are they? What are those experiments specifically, and what have you found as a result of them?
Well, several of us have done research. My particular experiments are what we call field experiments. In fact, right around here in the PBS studio, where we pretend to commit crimes in public and observe how people react. And unfortunately, we find that in urban environments, people either don't notice us or they don't care. For whatever reason, the rate of intervention is very low.
Mhm.
So the bystander effect is the tendency of people in large groups to not react during a crisis.
So if something like what happened to Kitty Genovese would happen today, on the second decade of the 21st century, in similar circumstances, what do you say would happen? Would it happen the same way?
Yes.
Really, that's what your experiments show?
Oh, absolutely. 9/11 has had an effect. People are more helpful in the past 15 years after 9/11.
Mhm.
That has really had an impact. But the fact is, Rosenthal opened our eyes to a phenomenon that we did not see before. Every day, people are victimized in public. After 1964, the term "I did not want to get involved" became taboo.
Mhm.
That no question the Genovese case had an impact. But unfortunately, one factor is ambiguity. In the Genovese case, it wasn't clear if she was drunk or a husband and wife fight. So that you're correct that if it's clear, if there's a stabbing going on, it makes a big difference.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, many of these incidents are in low, difficult situations where it's not clear what's happening.
And people are still writing about it. All these books are about Kitty Genovese.
That is one thing that makes it unique,
Mhm.
is that for 49 years, we knew only the last 28 minutes of her life. There was not a single biography of the first 28 years.
Mhm.
And it is just none of us can explain it. There are about 25 of us who
Mhm.
meet to discuss the Genovese incident, and there's just nothing like it. Why there was no biography for 49 years, it can't be explained.
You know, the murderer, the person who perpetrated this crime on Kitty Genovese, just recently died. Did you ever have a chance to speak to him, or did anyone interview him about what he thought of the crime and what he thought about the fact that no one came to Kitty's help?
Like William Genovese, several of us initially had no interest in learning more about him. In fact, I tried not to mention his name. But the fact is, when Albert Steedman interviewed the killer, he asked, "Why weren't you scared?" And the killer said, "I knew they wouldn't do anything. People never do."
Wow.
Which is chilling that a sociopath knows human nature that well, even more than us psychologists do.
Well, Professor, it's a fascinating study, and it's a sad study if what you suggest is true, that perhaps many of us would do the same thing today.
Yes, and fortunately, shows like this one discourage that and open people's eyes.
All right, Professor. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
All right, guys. So the elephant in the room has to be that interviews viewers, the guy being interviewed, his mustache. Oh my God. But I think a couple things that are important to take away from that is the idea that in the past, since this happened, that the term "I didn't want to get involved," that phrase as an excuse, has kind of become taboo, meaning people are looked down upon if they use it. And then he did mention one specific event, especially in the history of New York City, that became significant in making people get involved, and that is September 11th. So I know you guys were pretty young when that happened, but I may point out that in the months in the immediate aftermath of September 11th, there was an enormous amount of public service advertising where people were being strongly encouraged to, if they see something, say something. And you still see those ads every now and then, not as often as you did in the months after September 11th. But the idea that if people had spoken up and pointed out certain things that they thought were weird or odd about that event, that maybe somebody would have done something to get involved. So I thought that was an interesting part of that interview. All right, so next. In the Google form, you're going to answer these two questions, these two. What do you think the bystander effect is? So in your own words, make sure your response uses full sentences. And what role do you think it played in the Holocaust? I'm not going to answer those questions for you. You should be able to figure it out. All right. There are some, I'm having trouble here. There are some other questions in the Google slide. So there's my dog, and that's it, guys. Bye.